In this podcast episode, Joe Rogan hosts Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, and Bryan Hubbard, a key figure in the Americans for Ibogaine initiative. The conversation covers groundbreaking efforts to legalize and expand medical research on Ibogaine, a psychedelic compound with potential to treat addiction, PTSD, brain injuries, and other trauma-related conditions. They discuss recent legislative victories in Texas and other states, the science and history behind Ibogaine, spiritual perspectives on psychedelics, and the challenges faced in overcoming regulatory and societal obstacles. Rick Perry and Bryan Hubbard detail the origins and progress of the Texas Ibogaine Initiative, a public health project backed by a $100 million commitment from the state of Texas. This initiative aims to conduct the first unified FDA drug development trial of Ibogaine in U.S. history. After months of advocacy, including extensive legislative lobbying, they secured overwhelming bipartisan support from Texas lawmakers. Perry recounts a pivotal meeting with Texas leadership, including Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and the House Speaker, where skepticism was overcome by powerful personal testimonies and scientific explanation, ultimately resulting in full funding for the project. The discussion delves into Ibogaine's unique properties as an alkaloid derived from the iboga shrub native to Gabon, Central Africa. It is emphasized for its extraordinary ability to interrupt physiological substance dependencies, particularly opioids, alcohol, methamphetamine, cocaine, and tobacco, often in a matter of days. Stanford research confirming Ibogaine's neuroregenerative effects on traumatic brain injury and mental health disorders, such as treatment-resistant depression, is highlighted. Both guests stress its potential for treating compulsive behaviors and addiction more broadly, noting that clinical trials are essential to bring this therapy safely and legally to the American public. Rick Perry shares his personal journey from skepticism and conservative opposition toward becoming an advocate of psychedelics, particularly Ibogaine, partly influenced by his relationship with veterans affected by trauma and addiction. He draws parallels between his earlier stance on criminal justice reform and his evolving understanding of the medicinal value of psychedelic therapies. Perry reflects on the influence of cultural narratives, drug war policies, and political dogma that have long stigmatized psychedelics, particularly within Republican circles. His advocacy challenges prevailing stereotypes, promoting an evidence-based approach to drug policy reform. Particular attention is given to the healing of veterans suffering from PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and opioid addiction. The conversation underscores the failures of traditional approaches within the VA and military healthcare systems, and how veterans have found hope through Ibogaine treatment conducted in Mexico and elsewhere. The powerful individual stories of recovered veterans and active military members who credit Ibogaine with saving their lives are shared, calling for broader access to this therapy to address the epidemic of suicide and addiction in military communities. Bryan Hubbard elaborates on the indigenous and spiritual origins of Ibogaine use among Central African peoples, such as the Bwiti spiritualists of Gabon. He connects this traditional knowledge with modern scientific findings, noting the compound's role in affirming a sense of individual human divinity. The podcast also touches on scholarly interpretations of religious texts suggesting psychedelic allegories in ancient scripture, including theories about Moses and the burning bush involving psychedelic plants. This spiritual framing seeks to expand understanding of psychedelics beyond recreational or purely medical lenses, framing them as tools for personal and collective transformation. The guests discuss the bureaucratic complexities and political resistance posed by the DEA and federal government in classifying Ibogaine as a Schedule I substance, despite its medical potential and non-addictive nature. They identify the right to try legislation as a potential avenue to provide patients access once safety trials are completed, although interpretations by the DEA currently limit this possibility for Schedule I substances. There is an urgent call for presidential leadership and executive action to reschedule Ibogaine, clear regulatory hurdles, and accelerate its integration into mainstream medical care. The conversation stresses the broader dysfunction in federal systems that slows progress on life-saving treatments. Following Texas's lead, multiple states, including Mississippi, West Virginia, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and others are advancing legislation to join a multi-state Ibogaine drug development trial. The guests highlight efforts to build a broad coalition across political lines and geographies to create a unified movement that can bypass federal inertia. There is also discussion about the potential for Native American tribes to claim sovereignty over Ibogaine treatment on tribal lands, potentially establishing clinics independently of state regulations, though legal complexities around interstate commerce are acknowledged. Rick Perry opens up about his own experience undergoing Ibogaine treatment to address mild anxiety, insomnia, and the effects of multiple concussions sustained over his lifetime. He shares impressive neuroimaging results, revealing increased brain activity and reversal of brain atrophy 6 months post-treatment, which was validated by a skeptical neurosurgeon friend. These personal testimonies strengthen their advocacy, exemplifying Ibogaine's neuroregenerative potential and healing beyond addiction treatment alone. The episode repeatedly stresses the devastating impact of opioid addiction and related public health crises in the United States, describing opioid use as demonic due to its destructive effect on individuals and communities. The guests criticize pharmaceutical companies such as Purdue Pharma for their role in perpetuating this epidemic and federal government failures to intervene effectively. They position Ibogaine as a much-needed alternative that could revolutionize treatment, decrease recidivism, and reduce the staggering human and economic toll caused by addiction and trauma. The collaboration with respected research institutions, such as the Center for Brain Health at the University of Texas at Dallas and Stanford University, is highlighted as critical to providing scientific rigor behind Ibogaine's therapeutic claims. They describe ongoing and upcoming studies focused on veterans and others suffering from brain injury and addiction, aiming to answer practical clinical questions about efficacy, duration of benefits, cognitive and emotional improvements, and underlying neurological changes. This research is framed as foundational to securing broader acceptance and legalization. Throughout the conversation, there are profound reflections on American society's spiritual famine and loss of community and meaning, especially among Generation X, the bicentennial children. The guests lament institutional corruption, social disintegration, and the failure of political leaders to address crises such as addiction, mental health, and war trauma. Psychedelic therapy is positioned as a catalyst for a cultural and spiritual reawakening, capable of restoring individual dignity, community cohesion, and ultimately transforming society. The dialogue candidly examines entrenched dogma, political ideology, and media-driven stereotypes that hinder open-minded discussion about psychedelics. Both Perry and Hubbard emphasize the importance of curiosity, humility, and willingness to revise one's beliefs based on new evidence. Perry shares anecdotes about his own shift from rigid conservatism to leadership on drug reform, encouraging listeners to detach their identity from fixed opinions and embrace growth. The guests discuss their partnership with the government of Gabon, recognizing that country as the origin of the Iboga plant and embracing a global mission to advance safe and ethical cultivation and use of Iboga medicine. They also mention plans to engage 5 Native American tribes collectively to support Ibogaine integration, reflecting a vision of a worldwide movement that respects indigenous knowledge and sovereignty while pursuing scientific validation and medical accessibility. Final reflections consider the unprecedented convergence of scientific innovation, technological advancement, and social transformation poised to address scarcity and human suffering on a massive scale. The guests emphasize that such progress depends not only on technology, but on healing trauma and reconnecting people with their spiritual essence. They warn against maintaining obsolete and oppressive institutional frameworks, calling for a revolution in consciousness, fueled by the therapeutic potential of compounds like Ibogaine. Throughout the episode, listeners are encouraged to get involved by supporting Americans for Ibogaine, advocating for state-level legislation, and helping to spread awareness about the benefits of Ibogaine. They share how grassroots activism has been pivotal in legislative victories and stress the importance of continuing to build momentum to reach a tipping point in national acceptance and policy change. The movement is portrayed as sustained by ordinary citizens, compelled by compassion, curiosity, and a desire to restore hope and dignity to millions of lives.